The wrench slipped from David Ross's grip and floated away in the low gravity. He cursed it under his breath and pushed off the asteroid's surface to catch it before it drifted into the darkness of space. Working alone on mining equipment millions of miles from Earth had taught him patience, but some days tested that virtue more than others. His helmet display showed the time, 3 hours past his shift end. The extraction drill needed repairs before tomorrow, or the whole operation would fall behind schedule. David grabbed the wrench and returned to the massive machine, its metal arms silent and still against the rocky surface. A warning beep interrupted his focus. His scanner picked up something unusual. Not debris, not a scheduled supply ship. The energy signature looked wrong, too weak for any human vessel. David pulled himself to his small work pod and checked the screen. Whatever it was drifting straight toward his position. He could ignore it. Let it pass by. Get back to fixing the drill. But curiosity had always been his weakness. The reason he left a comfortable military career to work out here in the belt, where strange things happened every day. David activated his pod's thrusters and moved toward the object. As he got closer, his lights revealed a vessel no bigger than a shipping container. Its hull bore marks of damage, scorched and torn in places. No identification marks he recognized. No response to his radio hails. He attached a tether line and pulled the vessel back to his station. The airlock barely fit the strange craft, but he managed to squeeze it inside. As pressure returned to the bay, David removed his helmet and approached the vessel carefully. His hand rested on the plasma cutter at his belt, just in case. The vessel's door opened with a hiss. Dozens of tiny figures poured out, each no bigger than his thumb. They moved with purpose despite their size, setting up small devices that projected holographic images into the air. David stood perfectly still, watching them work. One of the figures stepped forward. Female, he thought, though it was hard to tell with being so small. She activated a device that created a larger hologram of herself, bringing her image to his eye level. Please, the hologram spoke in accented but clear English. We need help. Our people are dying. David crossed his arms. Who are you? I am Lyra of the Pi Mame. We fled from our colony ship when it was attacked. Only 43 of us survived. The hologram flickered, showing images of destruction. Ships being torn apart by dark, writhing masses. Planets stripped bare of all life. We have been running for weeks. Your beacon was the first sign of civilization we found. What attacked you? David asked, his voice steady despite the disturbing images. We call them the Swarm. They consume everything. All organic matter, all technology they can use. They have taken 4 of our worlds in 3 cycles. Lyra's hologram showed fear and exhaustion. We sent diplomatic envoys. They were consumed. We sent military ships. They were destroyed. We evacuated millions, but the Swarm followed. Now only scattered groups like ours remain. David studied the images carefully. The creatures looked like a nightmare mixture of insect and machine, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested intelligence. Or at least programming. And you want me to do what, exactly? Give us shelter, resources, time to contact other PIM survivors and plan our next move? Lyra's voice carried desperation. We can offer technology and trade. Our shield systems are advanced, our sensors can detect threats across vast distances. We have medical knowledge that could benefit your people. That's generous, David said. He crouched down to see the actual Lyra better, not just her hologram. She stood proud despite her small size, her people gathered behind her. But I'm just one miner on one station. I can't fight an invasion force. I can't protect your entire species. We know. We only ask for a chance to survive long enough to warn others. To find a safe place to rebuild? Lyra looked up at him with eyes that held too much sadness for someone so small. Please, we have lost everything. David was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the comfortable life he left behind, the military that wanted him to follow orders without question, the people who needed help but couldn't get it because of politics and bureaucracy. Out here he made his own choices. Helped who he wanted to help, But this was bigger than recovering a lost cargo shipment or rescuing a stranded pilot. This was an extinction-level threat to an entire species. Maybe multiple species if the swarm kept spreading. "Show me," David said finally. Lyra's hologram tilted its head. "Show you what?" "Show me the threat. Take me to where you last saw the swarm. I want to see what we're dealing with before I commit to anything." David straightened up and walked to his computer console. "I'm not saying no. But I'm not saying yes based on stories and images. I need to see it with my own eyes." "That is dangerous," Lyra protested. "If the swarm detects us, we may not escape." "I've dealt with dangers before." David pulled up star charts on his screen. "You said you fled from your colony ship. How far to the last known swarm position?" Lyra hesitated, then provided coordinates. 6 days at standard human vessel speed. "But why risk this? Why not simply believe us?" David looked at her, his expression serious but not unkind. "Because if I'm going to help you, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into. I need to understand how this enemy thinks, how it moves, what its weaknesses might be. You can't fight what you don't understand." "The peon tried to fight. We failed. Maybe you fought wrong." David began calculating the journey requirements. "You said your military tried. What tactics did they use?" "Standard defensive formations. Shield walls to protect civilian ships during evacuation. Coordinated fire patterns." Lyra sounded confused by the question. "What other way is there?" David smiled without humor. "Lots of ways. Humans have spent thousands of years figuring out how to kill things that are bigger, stronger, or more numerous than us. If this swarm can be killed, we'll figure out how." Lyra studied him through her hologram. This human was different from what she expected. No immediate promises of salvation, no refusal born of fear. Just a calm, practical assessment of the situation. "You truly wish to see the swarm before deciding?" "I do." David finished his calculations. "Your people can stay here while we're gone. The station has supplies and safe quarters. Pick one of your people who knows the swarm best to come with me." "We leave in 6 hours. I will come," Lyra said immediately. "Fine." David headed toward his quarters. "Get some rest, and Lyra, I hope you're wrong about them. But if you're right, we're going to need more than hope to stop them." As he walked away, Lyra watched the human with a mixture of confusion and a strange new feeling. Hope, yes. But also something else. The sense that perhaps, finally, someone was willing to truly face the nightmare that had destroyed her people. The scout ship's engines hummed steadily as it cut through the darkness between stars. David sat in the pilot seat, checking systems and reviewing the route for the 3rd time. Beside him, on a specially modified console scaled to her size, Lyra monitored the sensor readings with practiced efficiency. 3 days into their journey, they had settled into a routine. David maintained the ship while Lyra explained PIM technology and culture. The size difference made conversation awkward at first, but they adapted. Lyra used her hologram projector for important discussions and her natural voice for casual talk. "Your ship is very basic," Lyra observed, not as criticism but simple fact. "Functional but minimal. Most species we encountered had more automated systems." David adjusted their trajectory slightly to avoid a debris field. "I prefer manual control. Automation fails when you need it most. Out in the mining belt, you learn to rely on yourself and equipment you can fix with basic tools. The PIM approach problems differently. We build systems to handle tasks so we can focus on research and trade." Lyra's antennae twitched in what David had learned was her version of a shrug. "It has worked well for 12,000 years. Until the swarm came," David said quietly. Lyra was silent for a moment. "Yes, until then." She manipulated her controls, bringing up historical records. "Would you like to see what my people achieved before the attacks?" David glanced at the holographic images she projected. Beautiful cities built vertically, reaching toward pastel skies. Gardens that covered entire continents. Orbital platforms that served as meeting places for dozens of species. Art, music, scientific discoveries? The PM had built a civilization focused entirely on peaceful advancement. You never had wars? He asked, small disputes over resources or territory in our early history. Nothing for 3,000 years. Lyra looked at her people's accomplishments with obvious pride and pain. We learned cooperation was more valuable than conflict. Why waste energy fighting when you can trade, share, grow together? David understood the appeal, but his experience told a different story. That works when everyone agrees to cooperate. What happens when someone doesn't? We had methods. Economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, collective agreements among peaceful species. Lyra's voice carried a bitter edge. None of those matter against something that doesn't negotiate. Tell me about your military, David said. You mentioned defensive formations. What kind of weapons did you use? Lyra brought up tactical displays. Energy weapons primarily? Clean, efficient, minimal resource cost. Our shields could absorb most attacks we encountered from pirates or the occasional aggressive species. Our strategy focused on defense until threats withdrew or accepted diplomatic solutions. David studied the formations. They were textbook defensive tactics. Protect the vulnerable, minimize casualties, wait for the enemy to give up or talk. It probably worked perfectly in a galaxy where most species valued their own survival over conquest. How long did you fight the swarm before evacuating? 4 standard weeks at our first colony. 3 at the second. By the third world, we evacuated immediately. Lyra's voice dropped. We learned quickly that fighting only delayed the inevitable. Or you learned the wrong lessons, David said. He pulled up his own historical files, showing human military conflicts throughout history. My species fought differently. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. Earth had predators, harsh environments, limited resources, species competing for the same space. We learned to fight smart, not just hard. Lyra watched the images with growing horror. Battles, weapons development, tactical innovations born from desperation. Your people have been fighting each other for your entire history, pretty much. David didn't sound proud or ashamed, just factual. We're good at it because we've had a lot of practice. The trick isn't just having better weapons. It's understanding your enemy and adapting faster than they do. The swarm adapts, Lyra warned. We hurt them at first, destroyed many units. Then they changed their approach, came from different angles, used our own destroyed ships against us. They learn. So do we. David pointed to one historical battle. This fight, humans were outnumbered 20-1. Should have been slaughtered. But they used terrain, weather, and the enemy's own tactics against them. Won by thinking differently. Lyra studied the battle carefully. This is guerrilla warfare. Hit and run. Avoid direct confrontation. When you're weaker, you don't fight fair. You fight smart. David zoomed in on another section. And when you're stronger, you still fight smart because overconfidence gets you killed. Over the following days, David taught Lyra basic tactical concepts. Flanking maneuvers. Supply line disruption. Psychological warfare. Things the PIM had never needed to consider. In return, Lyra explained PIM technology in detail. Their shields were remarkable, able to absorb incredible amounts of energy. Their sensors could detect objects across entire star systems. Your people built tools for peace, David said during one discussion. Mine built tools for war. Maybe together those tools become something better. Lyra found the idea strange but intriguing. The PM had always believed cooperation meant similarity. Same goals, same methods, same peaceful philosophy. But this human suggested cooperation between opposites. Combining different strengths instead of finding common ground. Why did you leave your military? Lyra asked suddenly. David was quiet for a long moment. Because I watched good people die while politicians argued about proper procedure. Saw entire colonies ignored because helping them wasn't strategically valuable. I joined to protect people. Found out the military protected interests instead. He checked their navigation. Out here, I help who I want to help. Make my own calls? Is that why you agreed to investigate the swarm? Because you can make your own decision? Partly. David met her eyes, or tried to give in the size difference. Also because you asked. Because you're desperate and scared but still trying. That takes courage. Courage or foolishness? Lyra said softly. My people say I should have accepted our fate. That resistance only prolongs suffering. Your people are wrong. David's voice was firm. Giving up guarantees failure? Fighting gives you a chance. Maybe small, maybe desperate, but still a chance. Lyra wanted to believe him. This human's confidence seemed unshakable, born from a species that survived by refusing to quit. But she had seen the swarm, watched them consume entire worlds. Felt the crushing weight of helplessness as her civilization crumbled on the sixth day. David's sensors detected the system Lyra identified as the swarm's last known position. He slowed their approach and activated stealth systems, basic military surplus he had installed years ago for avoiding pirates. We're close, he said. From here we observe only. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We gather information and leave. Understood? Lyra nodded, her small body tense. Understood. David, if we're detected, do not try to save me. Get the information back to others who can use it. David smiled slightly. Not planning on dying today, Lyra, but I appreciate the dramatic speech. Despite her fear, Lyra found herself almost laughing. This human faced a nightmare with jokes and calm planning. It was either inspiring or insane. Maybe both. The ship entered the system quietly, hiding among debris and dead satellites. And there, ahead of them, Lyra saw the reason her species was dying. David saw it too, and for the first time since they met, his expression turned cold and focused. The expression of a soldier evaluating an enemy. Well, he said quietly, now I understand what we're dealing with. Silence filled the scout ship's cabin as David and Lyra watched the horror unfold before them. The viewing screen showed a moon being systematically destroyed by millions of dark shapes. Moving in perfect coordination. The swarm looked like insects crossed with machines. Each unit was roughly the size of a human torso, with multiple mechanical limbs and a segmented body that pulsed with organic tissue. They moved across the moon's surface in waves, tearing into the rock and soil, consuming everything. Above the surface, larger flying variants carried materials up to massive processing ships in orbit. They're harvesting, David said, recording everything his sensors detected. Not just attacking, they're breaking down matter and using it for something. Reproduction, Lyra whispered. Every world they consume creates more of them. We estimated they doubled their numbers with each planet they took. David watched the patterns carefully. The swarm moved with clear organization. Scout units on the perimeter, harvesters in the middle, transport units moving materials continuously. Like ants at a picnic, each knowing its role without apparent communication. How do they coordinate? He asked. Radio signals? Pheromones? Some kind of hive mind? We never determined the exact method. Our scientists died before completing their research. Lyra pulled up PI military reports on her display. We know destroying individual units does nothing. They simply adapt and continue. We theorized a central coordination system, but never found proof. David adjusted his sensors, scanning different frequencies. His equipment was basic compared to PIM technology, but sometimes basic was enough. Military surplus sensors designed to find hidden enemy communications in war zones. There, a low-frequency pulse, barely detectable, emanating from the processing ships. It repeated in regular intervals like a heartbeat. Lyra, are you seeing this? She checked her instruments. A coordination signal. Very subtle. Our sensors might have missed it because we were looking for complex communications, not simple pulses. Sometimes simple works better, David said. He tracked the signal to its source, one particular ship that looked slightly different from the others. Larger, with more organic components visible in its structure. That ship? It's directing traffic. As they watched, a small group of swarm units broke away from the main force. Scout patrol, David recognized the pattern. They moved toward the debris field where his ship was hiding. They detected us, Lyra said. Alarm in her voice. Maybe routine patrol. David's hand moved to the controls, but he didn't activate the engines yet. Wait, the scouts came closer, scanning the debris with sensor sweeps. David held perfectly still, letting his ship's passive systems do their job. The stealth coating absorbed most scanner frequencies. He had used it before to avoid pirates and overly curious customs officers. One scout passed within 50 meters. Its sensors swept across their position, paused, swept again. Lyra held her breath, which David noticed even with her small size. Her entire body was tense, ready to flee. The scout moved on. They didn't see us? David said quietly. Good, now we wait for them to clear the area, then we leave. No, Lyra said suddenly. Look, one is separated from the others. She was right. One scout unit had wandered further from its group, investigating a piece of debris on its own. The other scouts were moving back toward the moon, leaving this one behind temporarily. We should leave, Lyra said, though her voice held uncertainty. David was already running calculations. Distance, timing, energy requirements. His mining equipment included magnetic grapples for catching or samples. Strong enough to grab a small asteroid. Probably strong enough to grab one swarm scout. Or we could catch it, he said. What? No, David, that's insane. If we're detected, the entire swarm will pursue us. They won't detect us if we're fast? David powered up the grapple system slowly, keeping energy signatures minimal. You said you never captured one for study. Never learned their weaknesses. Maybe that's why you couldn't beat them. We tried to capture specimens. They self-destructed when cornered. Then we don't give this one time to self-destruct. David positioned his ship carefully, using debris as cover. The isolated scout was focused on examining a destroyed satellite. Its attention completely absorbed. David launched the magnetic grapple at full power. The cable shot out silently in the vacuum, crossed the distance in seconds, and clamped onto the swarm scout with a metallic clang that vibrated through the hull. The scout reacted instantly, thrashing and trying to signal its companions. David retracted the grapple at maximum speed, pulling the creature toward his ship while activating his engines and accelerating away from the system. The scout was still struggling when it slammed into the external cargo cage David had prepared. Magnetic locks engaged, trapping it inside a reinforced container usually used for volatile or samples. David hit the button to seal the container and flood it with an electromagnetic field that Lyra had helped him design during their trip. The scout's movements became erratic, then sluggish, then stopped. Not dead, David's sensors showed, but disrupted. Unable to function properly. Got it, David said, pushing his engines harder. Behind them, the other swarm scouts finally noticed their companion was missing. They turned toward David's ship, accelerating fast. They're coming, Lyra warned. I know. Hold on. David activated every speed modification he had installed over the years. The scout ship wasn't meant for racing, but miners learned to make their equipment do things manufacturers never intended. The swarm scouts were fast, but David knew the system's layout. He dove toward a dense asteroid field, weaving between rocks with practiced skill. The scouts followed but struggled with the obstacles. They were built for coordinated attacks in open space, not individual pursuit through hazards. David pushed through the field and activated his hyperspace drive. The moment he cleared the last asteroid, the ship jumped away, leaving the scouts behind. Only when they were safely in hyperspace did David let out a breath. Well, that was exciting. Lyra stared at him with her large eyes. You are either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? David left the pilot seat and headed toward the cargo bay. Come on. Let's see what we caught. The swarm scout sat motionless in the electromagnetic cage. Up close, it was even more disturbing. Organic tissue grafted onto mechanical components. A mouth that looked designed for tearing and consuming. Multiple eyes that seemed to follow their movement. Even while the creature was frozen, David pulled on protective gloves and grabbed his tools. You said the PIM tried to study these things. What stopped you? They would self-destruct. release toxins or explode or simply shut down all functions. Lyra watched from a safe distance. We learned nothing useful before they died. Then we work fast. David activated recording equipment and began his examination. He had dissected plenty of things in his life. Strange alien creatures found in asteroids. Mechanical systems he needed to understand. This was both at once. He found the self-destruct mechanism quickly, a small organ connected to the central nervous system, designed to trigger if the creature detected capture or injury. David carefully disconnected it before it could activate, using techniques he learned from disarming old military explosives. With the self-destruct disabled, he continued his study. The creature's biology was fascinating and horrible. It consumed organic matter and converted it into fuel. It could adapt its body using consumed genetic material. It was built to be the perfect harvesting machine, but it also had weaknesses. The electromagnetic field disrupted its coordination signal, leaving it unable to function. The organic components needed specific nutrients that might be denied. The mechanical parts could be damaged with focused attacks. Most importantly, David found the coordination node Lyra had theorized about. A small device embedded in the creature's brain, receiving instructions from the command ship and passing them to the body. Without it, the creature was just confused biological machinery. "This is it," David said, showing Lyra his findings. "This is how we beat them. They're not invincible. They're just well organized. Disrupt the organization and they fall apart." Lyra looked at the dissected creature, then at David's confident expression. "You really believe we can fight them? I believe we can hurt them. Make them bleed. And if they can bleed, they can die." David cleaned his tools and sealed the creature's remains. "Now we need to figure out how to do that on a large scale." For the first time since the swarm destroyed her world, Lyra felt something other than fear and despair. She felt possibility. This human had seen the nightmare and responded not with terror but with analysis. Not with acceptance but with defiance? "What do we do now?" she asked. David smiled. "Now we go back to my station and build something that can kill these things properly. And then we find out if humans are as good at fighting as I think we are." David's workbench was covered in technical drawings, scattered tools, and half-assembled devices that looked more dangerous than functional. He had been working for 16 hours straight, pausing only to gulp down coffee and explain his ideas to Lyra. "This is insane," Lyra said for the 5th time that day. She stood on a raised platform David had built so she could see his work properly. Around them, the mining station's workshop hummed with activity as David modified equipment at a frantic pace. "Insane is letting the swarm eat the galaxy," David replied. He finished welding a component and held it up to examine. "This is just creative problem-solving." He had taken his mining equipment and weaponized it. Ore launchers became railguns capable of firing tungsten slugs at incredible speeds. Plasma cutters designed for slicing rock were modified into close-range weapons. Rock drills turned into armor-piercing tools. Every piece of machinery he owned was being converted into something that could hurt the swarm. "Even with these weapons, you're one person," Lyra pointed out. "The swarm has millions of units, hundreds of ships. You can't fight them alone, not planning to." David activated his long-range communicator and sent out a message on frequencies used by independent miners and freight haulers throughout the belt. "I'm calling in favors." Over the next 2 days, ships arrived at David's station. Rough, independent-minded humans who made their living in the dangerous spaces between civilized worlds. Miners, salvage operators, freight runners, a few former military who asked no questions about why they left. Each one listened to David's explanation with varying degrees of skepticism. "You want us to fight alien monsters," said Rachel, a salvage operator with more scars than manners. "For free." "Not for free," David corrected. He displayed the PIM star charts showing systems the swarm had cleared. Every world they strip becomes salvage rights. Technology, resources, empty systems ready for claiming. Plus, the PIM are offering their shield technology to anyone who helps. That got their attention. PIM shields were legendary among the few species who knew about them. Energy barriers that could absorb fire that would vaporize human ships? And if we die fighting these things? Asked another pilot, a quiet man named Raymond who flew a heavily modified cargo hauler. Then we die. David didn't sugarcoat it. But we die fighting instead of waiting for the swarm to reach human space, because they will reach us eventually. They don't stop, they don't negotiate, they just consume and move on. The gathered humans looked at each other. These weren't heroes or idealists. They were survivors who chose hard lives in dangerous places. But they were also people who understood threats and opportunities. "Show us these shields," Rachel demanded. Lyra had been waiting for this moment. She activated a demonstration using PIM technology adapted to human ships. A barrier of energy appeared, shimmering in the air. David fired his modified plasma cutter at full power. The shield absorbed the blast completely, barely flickering. The humans murmured appreciatively. Shields like that could make salvage operations in dangerous areas much more profitable. Could protect against pirates and natural hazards. Could change everything about how they worked. "We're in," Rachel said. Others nodded agreement. "But we do this smart, no suicide runs. We fight when we can win and run when we can't." "Agreed," David said. "We're not trying to destroy the swarm entirely. Just hurt them enough that they learn to avoid us. Make them find easier prey somewhere else." Over the following week, the station became a hive of activity. 20 ships were modified with PIM shields and human weapons. David taught tactical basics to pilots who had never fought in coordinated groups. Lyra helped integrate PIM sensor technology so the human ships could track swarm movements better. The PIM refugees watched with amazement and confusion. They saw humans joke and laugh while preparing for war. Saw them treat deadly weapons as toys to be improved. Saw them face the threat that destroyed an entire civilization with excitement instead of fear. "I don't understand your people," Lyra told David one night. He was making final adjustments to his scout ship, adding armor plating and weapon mounts. "They seem happy about fighting." "Not happy about the fighting," David corrected. "Happy about the challenge. Humans are weird that way. We like testing ourselves against difficult things. Makes us feel alive. The PIM feel alive through creating, building, growing." Lyra watched him work with his hands, shaping metal and wire into tools of destruction. "We could never find joy in preparing to hurt others." "That's because your species never needed to," David said gently. "You evolved on a world that loved you. Gave you everything you needed. Earth tried to kill us constantly. Predators, diseases, disasters, each other. We learned to love the fight because fighting was how we survived. Is it really love? Or is it just what you tell yourselves to accept?" "Violence?" David paused and considered her question seriously. "Maybe both. Maybe humans are broken in ways you're not. But right now, you need broken people who know how to break things." Lyra couldn't argue with that logic, though she wished she could. The day before departure, David gathered everyone for final preparations. He stood before the assembled pilots and the PIM refugees, an unlikely group united by necessity. "Listen up," he said. "We're not an army. We're not heroes. We're just people who saw a problem and decided to do something about it. The swarm thinks everything is prey. We're going to teach it different. What's the plan?" Rachel asked. "The PIM have sensors that detected a swarm attack on one of their colony worlds. It started 2 days ago. By the time we arrive, the attack will be in full swing." David displayed the tactical map. "We hit them hard, rescue who we can, and make them pay for every meter they take. And if we can't win?" someone asked. "Then we make them work for it. Make them remember that some prey bites back." David looked at each pilot. "Everyone clear on the plan?" They were. Not because it was a good plan or a safe plan, but because it was the only plan that mattered. Do nothing and eventually the swarm reaches human space. Fight now and maybe change the equation. The fleet departed the next morning. 20 ships. A mixture of mining vessels and cargo haulers modified into improvised warships. Inside David's ship, Lyra watched the asteroid belt fall away behind them. "David," she said quietly, "why are you really doing this? You could have taken us in, given us shelter, and stayed safe. Why risk everything?" David was quiet for a moment, guiding his ship into formation with the others. You asked for help. You showed me the threat. And I decided I could do something about it. That's enough reason for me. Because you can, Lyra repeated softly. She was beginning to understand humans a little better. They didn't need complex philosophical justifications for their actions. They didn't need to debate the ethics of intervention. They just saw a problem they could solve and decided to solve it. It was terrifying and inspiring in equal measure. Hey, David, Rachel's voice crackled over the radio. How mad do you think these swarm things are going to be when we crash their party? Pretty mad, David replied, smiling. Let's find out. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward a battle none of them were sure they could win. But humans had never let poor odds stop them before. That was the thing about a species raised on a death world. They learned early that impossible just meant no one had succeeded yet. Lyra looked at the determined faces on her display screens. These humans were nothing like the PIAM. They were crude, violent, and utterly unconcerned with proper civilization. They were also exactly what her people needed. Thank you, she whispered, knowing David couldn't hear her over the engine noise. Thank you for not giving up when we had. The fleet raced toward war, carrying hope in the form of modified mining equipment and people too stubborn to accept extinction. Reality snapped back into normal space with a violent lurch that made David's teeth rattle. His sensors came online immediately, flooding his display with data. The PIM colony world hung before them, a beautiful blue sphere being devoured by darkness. Contact, Raymond reported over the radio. Swarm ships in orbit. Hundreds of them. Ground forces are active on 3 continents. David scanned the surface. His thermal sensors showed massive heat signatures where the swarm was harvesting cities. But they also showed pockets of survivors, PM who were trapped and waiting to die. Thousands of them huddled in shelters that wouldn't hold much longer. Rachel, take your team and hit those processing ships in high orbit, David ordered. Make them notice you. Raymond, your group moves low and provides cover for ground operations. I'm taking my ship down to pull survivors out. You're going into that? Rachel sounded incredulous, even for her. The planet's surface was a nightmare of swarm activity. Someone has to. Besides, they won't expect us to be that stupid. David pushed his engines forward. Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to hurt them and save lives. Hit hard, move fast, don't get surrounded. The fleet split into 3 groups. Rachel's salvage ships were the fastest, equipped with the heaviest weapons David could mount. They screamed toward the swarm processing vessels in orbit, railguns charging. The swarm noticed them immediately. Hundreds of flying variants launched from the processing ships, moving to intercept. They expected the human ships to engage at long range like the PIAM had done. Rachel dove straight into their formation instead. Contact! She screamed with obvious joy in her voice. Her railgun fired, tungsten slugs punching through swarm flyers like paper. The PIM shields absorbed return fire, glowing but holding. These things pop real nice. Her team followed her lead, turning the battle into a close-range brawl. The swarm adapted quickly, trying to surround individual ships. But the humans didn't fight like the PIM. They didn't hold formation. They weaved, dodged, used each other as bait, and fired from unexpected angles. They're trying to coordinate against us, Rachel reported. Not working so good. That was because David had planned for it. The electromagnetic pulse generators he had installed were cycling randomly, disrupting the coordination signals without completely jamming them. The swarm could still function, but they were confused. Their usual perfect synchronization broken. While Rachel's team created chaos in orbit, David plunged toward the surface. Lyra sat in her special seat, monitoring sensors and calling out threats. Large concentration of swarm ahead, she said. They're harvesting a residential area. Thermal shows survivors in the underground shelters. How long until the shelters fail? Minutes. The swarm is cutting through the doors. David pushed his engines harder than recommended. His ship wasn't designed for atmospheric combat, but neither was most of his equipment. That hadn't stopped him yet. He came in low and fast, skimming over buildings that were being torn apart by swarm harvesters, the modified plasma. Cutters mounted on his ship fired at maximum range. The beams carved through swarm units like hot knives through butter. Bodies fell, twitching. The harvesters turned toward this new threat. Abandoning the shelter entrance, David landed his ship directly in front of the shelter door. He hit the external speakers. "I'm inside. I'm human. I'm here to help. Move to my cargo bay now." The shelter door opened cautiously. Tiny faces peered out, frightened and confused. Then they saw the swarm units advancing on David's ship and understood. They ran, hundreds of thumb-sized people fleeing toward safety. David's plasma cutters fired continuously, keeping the swarm back. His shields glowed under repeated impacts. A warning light flashed, indicating shield strength dropping. The PM technology was incredible, but it had limits. "Hurry!" Lyra shouted at her people through the external speakers. "Move faster!" The last few PIAs scrambled aboard. David lifted off immediately, engines screaming with effort. Swarm flyers pursued, but Raymond's team appeared from nowhere, heavy weapons blazing. "Got your back, David," Raymond said calmly. His cargo hauler was covered in improvised armor and bristling with mining lasers. "Get those people clear. We'll handle the bugs." David climbed toward orbit, his cargo bay packed with rescued PI behind him. Raymond's team fought a running battle against swarm flyers. They used terrain, diving behind buildings and through canyons, never letting the swarm establish firing solutions. In orbit, Rachel's chaos was working too well. The swarm had brought in reinforcements, trying to establish control. But every time they formed up, the humans broke formation and scattered, only to regroup somewhere else and attack from a new angle. "This is insane," one of the other pilots shouted. "We're outnumbered 50-1. "Yeah," Rachel replied. "But we're winning. Keep moving. Don't give them time to coordinate." She was right. The swarm was taking casualties. Real casualties. The processing ships were damaged, leaking atmosphere and materials. Hundreds of swarm units floated dead in space. For the first time in their invasion, they were losing a fight, but they were learning too. David watched the tactical display and saw patterns emerging. The swarm was adapting to human tactics, starting to predict movements, adjusting coordination to compensate for the disruption. "All ships, this is David. We've got our people." "Time to go, already?" Rachel sounded disappointed. "We're just getting started. We hurt them. Made our point. Now we leave before they figure us out completely." David was already calculating jump coordinates. "Everyone form up on my ship. We jump in 60 seconds. The human fleet regrouped with practiced efficiency. They had rescued over 3,000 PIA from the surface and destroyed significant swarm resources. As they prepared to jump away, David launched one final surprise. Small devices he had placed on the processing ships during the confusion activated. Electromagnetic bombs based on the technology that disrupted the swarm scout. They detonated simultaneously, sending pulses through the swarm fleet. The coordination signals collapsed. For several seconds, the swarm units were completely disorganized, individual creatures with no guidance. They crashed into each other, fired randomly, spun in confusion. "Beautiful," David said. Then he engaged the hyperdrive. The human fleet jumped away, leaving the swarm to recover and contemplate what had just happened. Inside David's ship, rescued PM clung to whatever they could grab, shocked and confused. They had been waiting to die, and suddenly strange giants appeared and pulled them from certain death. One elder PIA approached Lyra on shaking legs. "What were those?" he asked. "What species fights like that?" "Humans," Lyra said. She felt strange saying it. Pride, maybe. Or hope. They came from the death world. They learned to fight things bigger and stronger than them. They're teaching us how. The elder PIA looked at her like she was crazy. "Teaching us? We're scholars and traders, not warriors." "We were," Lyra corrected. "But the swarm doesn't care what we were. Only what we're willing to become." She looked toward the cockpit where David was checking casualty reports. These humans, they're showing us we don't have to be victims. On the tactical display, one piece of data stood out. The swarm was retreating from the planet's surface. Not because they were defeated, but because they were regrouping, reassessing. For the first time since they appeared in PIM space, the swarm had encountered resistance that actually hurt them. David saw it too. He smiled without humor. They're learning we're dangerous. Good, let them think about that. What happens now? Lyra asked. Now we go back to the station, drop off the refugees, refit, and do it again. David plotted their course home. And this time we bring more ships, more weapons, more humans who want to prove they can fight monsters. Rachel's voice crackled over the radio. David, that was the most fun I've had in years. When's the next run? Soon, David promised. The swarm just learned a valuable lesson. Some prey fights back. We're going to teach them that lesson over and over until they decide PIM space is too expensive to take. Lyra watched the rescued PIM settling into the cargo bay, saw their fearful expressions slowly change to something else. Not confidence, not yet, but possibility. The understanding that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to accept extinction. David, she said quietly, you saved 3,000 lives today. How many millions are still trapped on other worlds? More than we can save in one trip, David admitted. But we saved 3,000 today. Tomorrow we'll save more. Day after that, more still. That's how you win wars. One battle at a time. One life at a time. It wasn't the grand salvation Lyra had dreamed of. It was better. It was real. 3 months had passed since David's first strike against the swarm. The mining station had transformed into something else entirely. A strange hybrid of human pragmatism and PIM, technology that neither species could have built alone. Lyra stood in what used to be a cargo bay and was now a command center. Holographic displays showed swarm movements across 12 systems. Human and PIM worked side by side, combining their different strengths into something new. The PIM provided sensors and tactical analysis. Humans provided combat experience and weapons innovation. Contact in Sector 7 announced a young PI named Tech. He had learned quickly how to interpret human military terminology. Swarm Scout Group, 20 units. Moving toward the mining colony on Outpost Red. Alert the defense team, Lyra ordered. Her voice carried authority now, shaped by 3 months of constant crisis. Tell them to use Pattern Delta. The swarm has adapted to our previous approaches. She had changed. They all had. The desperate refugee who begged for help was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that survival required strength, and strength required the willingness to fight. David entered the command center, grease staining his hands from working on ship repairs. How many incoming? Small force? The defense platform should handle it. Lyra pulled up tactical data, but I'm concerned about the larger pattern. The swarm is probing our defenses more frequently. They're learning our capabilities. Good means we're making them nervous. David studied the displays with experienced eyes. Any word from the other refugee groups? 4 more PIM colonies have contacted us asking for help, and 3 other species who encountered the swarm. Lyra's antennae twitched with concern. We're receiving more requests than we can answer. That was the problem with success. Word had spread through displaced populations that humans were fighting the swarm and winning, or at least not losing, which was more than anyone else could claim. Now, everyone wanted human protection. We can't defend everyone, David said. But we can teach them to defend themselves. That had become his philosophy. Don't create an empire. Don't build dependencies. Give people the tools and knowledge to fight their own battles. It was slower than simply taking control, but it was sustainable. The defense platforms engaged the swarm scouts with precise fire. Human weapons guided by PIM sensors. The scouts were destroyed efficiently, their coordination disrupted by electromagnetic pulses. It was routine now, almost boring. Enemy neutralized, Tech reported. No losses on our side. Note their approach vectors, Lyra instructed. Add them to the pattern database. She had learned to think tactically, to see battles as data to be analyzed and lessons to be learned. It still felt strange, but necessary. The PAM had survived by being peaceful. They would survive the future by being prepared, alarms blared suddenly. Multiple contacts appearing simultaneously across their sensor network? Not scouts. Capital ships? Hundreds of them. That's the main fleet, David said quietly. He had been expecting this. The swarm wasn't stupid. It learned, adapted, and eventually responded with overwhelming force. They're done testing us. This is the real attack. We should evacuate, Tech said, fear in his voice. No, Lara's voice was firm. We defend. That's what we've been preparing for. David looked at her with something like pride. 3 months ago, she would have run. Now she stood ready to fight. Lara's right. This is our home now. Our people are here. We defend them. He activated the station-wide alert. All ships to defensive positions. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. The response was immediate and practiced. Human ships launched from docking bays, taking positions around the station. PIM sensor operators fed targeting data to human gunners. The electromagnetic field generators powered up, ready to disrupt swarm coordination. Rachel's voice came over the radio. Well, David, looks like they brought everyone. Looks like, David agreed. His hands moved across controls with calm efficiency. Remember the plan. Don't try to win. Just make them pay for every meter. The swarm fleet approached in perfect formation. Processing ships in the center surrounded by hundreds of attack units. It was textbook overwhelming force, designed to crush resistance through sheer numbers. David waited until they were committed to their approach. Then he activated the surprise he had been building for 3 months. Dozens of electromagnetic mines detonated throughout the swarm formation. Not enough to destroy the fleet, but enough to completely disrupt their coordination. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as individual units lost connection with the command structure. Now, David shouted. The human fleet attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. Not head-on charges into the enemy formation, but surgical strikes at vulnerable points. They targeted the command ships first, the ones broadcasting coordination signals. Rachel's team hit them with concentrated railgun fire while Raymond's group provided cover. The swarm tried to adapt, to re-establish coordination, but the humans kept moving. They never stayed in one place long enough to be surrounded. Never fought fair when unfair would win. On the station, Lyra commanded the defense platforms with growing confidence. She predicted swarm movements using pattern analysis and directed fire where it would hurt most. Her people provided targeting data faster than any human computer. Tech coordinated shield distribution, keeping defenses strong at critical points. The battle raged for 6 hours. The swarm kept coming, wave after wave, learning with each attack. But the defenders learned faster. Every swarm tactic was analyzed, countered, and turned against them. Slowly, impossibly, the swarm fleet began to falter. They had never faced sustained resistance before. Never encountered prey that adapted faster than they did. Never paid such a high price for so little gain. The processing ships, those massive vessels that symbolized swarm domination, started withdrawing. Then the attack units followed. Not a rout, but a strategic retreat. A decision that this target was too costly to take. David watched them go with satisfaction. Stand down. Let them leave. We made our point. The human fleet regrouped around the station, battered but intact. PIM operators checked systems and calculated casualties. Lower than expected. Much lower. The shields had held. The weapons had worked. The training had paid off. We won, Tech said, disbelief in his voice. We actually won. We survived, Lyra corrected. That's the same as winning right now. David left his ship and found Lyra in the command center. She was reviewing battle data, already planning improvements for next time. Always next time. The swarm wouldn't give up, which meant neither could they. You did good, David told her. Your people are learning fast. We had a good teacher. Lyra allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before returning to work. But this was just one fleet. The swarm is hundreds more. Thousands, maybe? Yeah, but now other species know they can be fought, can be hurt, can be stopped. David pulled up communications, data showing dozens of messages from other civilizations. You wanted help when you first came to me. Now you're the ones others come to for help. Lyra understood what he meant. The PM had gone from victims to survivors to defenders. They still weren't warriors by nature, but they no longer needed to be victims by default. Will you stay? She asked. Keep helping us? David smiled. Where else am I going to go? I've got a good thing here. People who need my skills. Purpose that matters. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't get too confident and do something stupid. Like attacking a swarm fleet with mining equipment? Exactly like that. David headed toward the workshop. Come on. We've got damaged ships to repair and new weapons to build. The swarm will be back and we need to be ready. Lyra followed, her small form easily keeping pace. Around them, humans and PIM worked together with the ease of long practice. Different species, different strengths, united by necessity and forged into something neither could be alone. Outside the station, stars shone in the darkness. The swarm was out there somewhere, calculating, adapting, preparing for their next move. But so were the defenders. For the first time since the swarm appeared, the galaxy had proven that extinction wasn't inevitable. Some prey fought back. Some prey won. And some prey taught others to do the same. David looked at Lyra and saw not the desperate refugee who had begged for help, but a leader who had learned to fight for her people. She looked at him and saw not a violent human from a death world, but a teacher who had shown them strength came in many forms. Thank you, Lyra said quietly, for not just saving us, for making us stronger. You showed me the threat, David replied, echoing his words from 3 months ago. I just showed you how to face it. The rest you did yourselves. They returned to work, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. The war wasn't over. It might never be over. But they had proven something important. Humans and PIM working together could stand against the darkness, and standing was enough. Standing was victory. Standing meant survival, and survival meant hope.